Hello there, Donut Rabbit GPS here. For those of you who've been following Rabbit GPS's YouTube channel for a while, you've probably noticed that in the past I've already had up a route planning on the web webinar, updates, and a few additional features. So I wanted to re-record that webinar so we have a nice up-to-date version to reference. So today, really, I'm just going to be taking you through sort of the ins and outs of creating a route on the Rabbit GPS website and also how to edit them as well. So the screen that we're looking at here is the default landing page of my account on the Rabbit GPS website. Little side note, your account on the website and in the app are one and the same. So anytime you plan a route, you make an edit to a route and you save it, that will be reflected in your app. So anything you do on the website will be automatically available and accessible in the app without you having to do anything extra. And I'm sitting on the dashboard and there's really not too much I want to talk about here. We'll come in and out a couple different times, but what I want to do now is just head to the route planner so we can talk about planning routes from scratch. So to do that, I click route planner at the top of the screen, and here I am. So we have a nice blank map that's focusing over my current location, more or less. And this is the medium that I'm going to use to create a route from scratch. Now I'm going to take you through the two main methods you can use to create a route in Rabbit GPS that are pretty much interchangeable with one another. But before I do that, I think one of the most important things to know about Rabbit GPS is how our default route planning algorithm works. So when you create a route on our service, the route planner is deciding which roads and trails to stick you on based on two main bits of information. The first thing it's looking for is there bicycle infrastructure? So while you're creating a route, if there is a bike path, road with a bike lane, or nationally recognized cycling route, the route planner is going to opt for those roads or trails over the other ones in the area. The other thing the route planner is looking for is where do people ride their bikes most frequently? The more frequent bicycle traffic a particular road or trail gets, the more likely it is that the route planner will snap to that road or trail over the other ones in the area. What you end up with, and you'll hear me generically say this a couple times today, is a route that uses the roads that are safest for cycling. Now, there are ways for you to fine-tune your routing algorithm a little bit, which I'll talk about a little bit later, but keep this in mind while I'm running through this route planning demo today. So the two main methods I'm going to show you for route creation. The first one I'm going to show you is the click as you go method. This is where you click where you want the route to start. You click along the roads that you want to use, and as you click, your route is created for you with turn-by-turn directions. The second method I'll show you a little bit later is how to jump from location to location by saying, hey, I want to start the route here, I want to end here, have the route planner connect those 2 points together using the roads that are safest for cycling. So the first method I'm going to cover is the click as you go method. In the lower right-hand corner of my map, you'll see this plus and minus button, which I'm using to zoom in and out of my map. So I'm going to zoom in nice and close and click where I want my route to start. Okay, that first click adds my green start icon. And then from here, I'm going to click along the roads that I want to use. And each time I click, you can see at the bottom of the screen, I have this nice interactive elevation profile created for me with some metrics shown at the top. I said it was interactive if you actually move your cursor along the elevation profile. You'll see this little yellow dot moving along as well, which you can sort of think of as the person actually riding this route. Over on the left-hand side of the screen here, you'll see our cue sheet. If I hit this little drop-down menu, you'll see all of the individual cues that are appearing on this route. So yeah, these cues are automatically generated as I plan. If I were to go back and make any subsequent changes to this route, the cue sheet is going to reflect those edits accordingly. And the cue sheet is what our app is actually using to provide you with those turn-by-turn voice navigation prompts as you navigate a route in our app. Okay, so let me click along a little bit. So if you're creating a route by clicking as you go, there's two main bits of information that you need to sort of keep in mind, or two things you need to be very careful with as you build. The first is be mindful of your zoom levels. I've zoomed out a little bit here just to show you that if I'm zoomed out this far, it can be tough to ensure that I'm clicking on the specific road I want to use and not one that's running parallel to the one that I'm interested in. You don't need to zoom in all the way, just close enough to ensure that you are accurately clicking on the specific roads that you want to use. Now, the other thing, and this is probably the more important thing to keep in mind if you are clicking as you go, is when you click, you want to avoid clicking in the middle of intersections. Instead, you want to click just past intersections in the desired direction of travel. So for instance, right here, if I'm thinking of making a right-hand turn, going down this little bike path here, and then turning back onward and continuing on Southeast 52nd Avenue here, in order to make this turn, I'm going to click past the intersection in the direction I want to go. I'm going to do that again, click here, and then click onward. So the reason why you don't want to click in the middle of intersections is when you do that, the route planner has a hard time of telling which direction you want to go in, and every once in a while that can result in a missing cue sheet entry or an incorrect cue sheet entry. But clicking just past intersections in the desired direction of travel will ensure that your cue sheet is nice and accurate, your route line looks nice and accurate, and you're seeing nice expected behavior from the route planner as you actually go through and build. Now you can keep your clicks pretty close together, as I'm doing here, or you can sort of spread your clicks out. It really depends on how familiar you are with the area, how particular you want to be about which roads gets used, all that sort of stuff. So I've sort of quickly created a route here that starts at my home location and ends at the top of Rocky Butte over here. When you're actually planning, the start icon is indicated by that green icon, and your endpoint is indicated by that little blue dot that we're seeing on the map. When you actually go through and you save this, the start icon and the endpoint icon will be reflected when you view that route. So in the upper right-hand corner of my screen here, I just wanted to call attention to these two buttons, which are some of the most frequently used tools in the route planner. This curved back arrow is your undo button. If I click it, it undoes my most recent edit. The curved forward arrow is redo, which redoes my most recent edit. These tools are super useful because if you make a mistake while you're planning, which happens, I think I consider myself an expert route planner and I still do it from time to time, hitting the undo button takes you one edit back and makes it so that, a small mistake or error doesn't mean you have to recreate your route from scratch. So remember they're there. I promise you'll end up using them from time to time. Okay, so that's a quick once over of the click as you go method. What I want to do now is clear my map and I'll show you the jump to method of route planning. Okay, so I'm back to having an entirely blank map. What I'm going to do now is utilize this enter location box over on the right-hand side of the screen. If I click in here, by default, you're always going to see two options at the top of the screen. One is your current location, where you are right now as you're planning, and the other is your home location, which would be your actual home address. If you've not updated your home address and you want to, save it for future route planning sessions, just hit this little update option on the right-hand side, and that'll allow you to input your specific home address. That said, any address will work just fine in this enter location box. That's usually one of the best ways for us to find the specific point you're looking for. Latitude, longitude coordinates also work. Place names also work. If there's the name of a local bike shop that you're interested in starting your route at or routing to, enter the name of that bike shop, and chances are we're going to be able to find it for you as well. But for the purposes of this demo here, I'm just going to choose my home location. So I click my home. Now the route planner sticks a little marker over my home location and gives me the option to start route here, which I'll click. That adds my little green start icon. Now I'm going to head back to the enter location box, and I'm going to enter my desired destination, which will be the Rocky Butte natural area. There it is. I'm going to click it. And the route planner jumps to the top of Rocky Butte, and I now have an option to route to here, which I'll click. As you can see, that quickly and easily joins these 2 points together for me using the roads that are safest for cycling. Super fast, super easy to do. But let's say I head to the top of Rocky Butte, okay, but I actually want to continue on, and I want to use some very specific roads that I have in mind. All right, I'm going to click along the roads that I want to use. Okay, and again, as I click, my route's created. And now I'm tired of clicking, and I just want to jump over to Vancouver, Washington. I head back to my enter location box, and now I'm going to type in Vancouver, Washington. Okay, there it's listed. And we jump over there with an option to route to here, and I'll click that. So I'm really just using this as an opportunity to show you that you can always hop back and forth between clicking as you go to build your route or jumping from location to location. Typically, when I create a route from scratch, I'm doing like a 50-50 mix of both of these methods. I click along the roads in an area that I'm familiar with and I know where I want to go. And I jump from location to location when I'm less familiar with the area and just want to connect those 2 points together. You can always hop back and forth, so choose your method. Doesn't mean you have to stick with it the whole time. Okay, let me hit the back button a couple times here. And now what I'd like to show you is how to edit your route. And real quick, pretend you don't see what I'm doing here. I'm just going to get rid of this one settings. We'll talk more about settings in just a second. So before I actually make my edit, let me just sort of propose it to you first. So let's say this route is perfect. I don't want it to change hardly at all, except about halfway through here, I actually want to divert course. I want to leave at this intersection that I'm resting my cursor on. I want to head to the top of Mount Tabor along some of these trails, and I want to make it back to my route and join right here at this intersection. So I really only want like a tiny little section of my route to change and move over to Mount Tabor. So one of the methods that you can use to edit your route line is by clicking the route line and dragging it onto the alternate roads that you want to use instead. But watch what happens when I do this. So again, keep in mind, I only wanted a really tiny little section of my route to change. I just want to head to Mount Tabor and continue on. But watch what happens when I do this. I click my route line, hold down, start dragging it over. The route line will highlight in black when you're doing this to give you a preview of what this edit's going to look like. And as you probably just saw, a whole bunch of the northern portion of my route changed, right? Which is not what I wanted. I only wanted a tiny little section to change. Once you let go of your click, that edit becomes official and your cue sheet's updated with all of that accordingly. But again, this is not what I had in mind. So let me hit the back button in the upper right. Okay, that takes me right back to what I had before. Okay, pretend you don't see what I'm doing. Just queuing up a little example here. Okay, you can look again. So previously, when I was creating my route by clicking as I went to build it, you probably saw a lot of these little white dots appearing on my route line. And these white dots are known as control points. What control points do is they're sort of dual purpose. Each time you click as you're building your route, one of those little white control points will appear to show you where you specifically clicked. The other thing control points do is they help constrain the structure of your route so you can make targeted click and drag edits that only focus on a particular segment. Someone once described thinking of and using control points for editing as thinking of them like brackets. If you have 2 control points on your route line, 2 brackets, the only thing that's going to change when you click and drag the route line along is just what's in between those 2 control points. Everything outside of that will stay the same. And I'll give you an example of this right here. So let me zoom in a little bit to the Mount Tabor area so I have a more up-close view of what I want to do. And I need to strategically place some control points because there aren't any in this area. To do that, I click the control point button on the right-hand side of the screen. When the control point button is turned on in blue, that allows me to click along my route line to add control points without actually adding distance each time I click. And the key to using these well is your placement. So I'm thinking of leaving my original course right here at this intersection. So just before that intersection, I'm going to click to add my first control point. Okay, there's my first control point, my first bracket. If I'm thinking of rejoining my route right here at this intersection, I'm going to add my second control point just after the point that I plan on rejoining. All right, so I have these 2 control points here. These are my 2 brackets. Now, watch what happens when I click and drag my route line in between there. The only thing that's highlighting in black, which means the only thing that's potentially changing, is just that portion in between my 2 control points. Everything outside of there stays the same. This edit looks exactly like what I had in mind, so I'm going to let go. And now that edit becomes official. We're still continuing on. We're starting at my home. We're heading to Mount Tabor, and then we're continuing on along to Rocky Butte using the same roads that had originally been chosen. So control points are great tools to help sort of define the space of your route that you want to edit. Add your first control point just before you plan on leaving your original route. Add your second control point just after the point you plan on rejoining. That'll make things work nice and easy when you click and drag the route line along. Now, one little thing I wanted to mention here, if you are looking at making an edit to your route and some existing control points on the route line are making it hard for you to click and drag and make that edit, with your control point tool turned on, you can click on existing control points to remove them. It's just a handy little thing to know about. All right, so those are control points. What I want to talk about now are some of our quick routing options or quick editing tools that you have. So right now, this route is a point-to-point route. It starts at my home and takes me all the way to the top of Rocky Butte and ends there. Let's say I wanted to quickly turn this into a round trip, meaning that we start at my home, we head to Rocky Butte, and then we head all the way back home using the same roads out as back in. We have this handy little out and back tool. If I click that, keep a quick eye on my route stats real fast. This route right now is 8.9 miles in length, has elevation gain of 615 feet. And this last number here is estimated time, which is looking at my past ride history and saying, based on what I've done in the past, the route planner thinks it's going to take me about 45 minutes and 33 seconds to get to that specific, to finish this complete route that we have here. So I'm going to hit the out and back button. And what happens is, all right, we're seeing some movement. Okay. Now, if we look at my metrics, you can see they've all of a sudden doubled in length. If we go to the elevation profile and start to move along, We head all the way to the top of Rocky Butte. We turn around and we head all the way back home using the same roads out as back in. So if you have an A to B route that you want to make a round trip nice and quick, that out and back feature is really nice to do that. Let me hit the back button here. Okay, so I'm back to my original just point-to-point route. Let's say this route is perfect, except I actually want to start at the top of Rocky Butte and end at my home. I just want to sort of reverse the direction. We have the reverse route tool, which I'll click and confirm. And now you can see the route planner is rebuilding this route from scratch in the opposite direction. Now, when you do this, the route planner is going to do its very best to maintain the structure of the original route and just simply flip-flop the start and end points. But we are rebuilding your route from scratch, so it may change slightly. Let's say, for example, that you originally plotted the wrong way down a one-way street. If we reverse that route exactly as it was planned, we don't want to send you the wrong way down a one-way street, so we might divert course a little bit to make sure that you're being safe and still following the rules of the road. But again, really nice feature. It's also really nice if you have like a loop route and you want to navigate it in the opposite direction of the way it was planned. Reverse that route and it should work just fine the way that you want it to. Okay, before I move on, I'm going to talk about map types in just a little bit, but one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, since we're still talking about creating routes here, is surface type and how we display it. So real fast, I'm going to create a route that takes us into some unpaved areas. Okay, let me click through here, take us through a little forest park tour. Okay, so if you look at my route line and in the elevation profile, you'll notice that it goes from this solid red color to this segmented striped red and white section. Solid red indicates a paved segment. The striped section indicates an unpaved segment. Over here on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see the surface type breakdown by percentage, and you'll also see a little legend. So if you forget what those markings actually mean, you can reference them over here. So yeah, this is just how we visually display surface type while you're actually going through and building a route. Which brings me to my next point. So over here on the right-hand side of the route planner, you're going to see your routing mode. And this is sort of a nice little thing to know about, because what the routing mode does, and I'm just going to sort of cue up some examples here, allows you to sort of change the rules of the road for the route planner while you're actually building. The default here is cycling, which is what everybody's going to want 99% of the time. This is creating a route in accordance with the rules of the road for cycling traffic. But you also have walking. This is going to prioritize the rules of the road for pedestrian traffic. A little pro tip here. Let me create a good example to show you. So if we zoom in nice and closely here, there's this sort of dashed line here, which is indicating that there is a walking path. If I try to route on here right now, you can see that the route planner isn't letting me. It's diverting course because bikes are not allowed on this trail. So it's sending me over to the next available street that I can ride a bike on. But let's say I actually do want to force routing through this particular trail here for walking. Let me hit undo. And I'm going to get close enough to where this sort of veers off. If I temporarily switch to walking and zoom in and click on the trail, it allows me to plot through there. So if you want to create a route for hiking, or you just temporarily need to sort of sidestep a problematic use case in the map, the way that I'm showing you here, temporarily switching to walking is a great way to do that. Once you get past the problematic section, switch back to cycling, so you'll now snap to roads and trails based on where cycling infrastructure is actually located. We have driving, so that prioritizes the rules of the road for an automobile. If you're creating driving routes, this is really nice. If you're using this for cycling, maybe you wanted to prioritize the absolute fastest way between 2 points, you could do that here. Just be very careful because it is following the rules of the road for automobile traffic, so you could get routed onto busy highways where bikes aren't allowed and that sort of thing. And then the last thing is this little draw lines option, which is sort of handy, definitely something that you'd only want to use very, very sparingly. And I'll give you an example here. It's actually the perfect spot. So you'll notice that there's this little trail here that sort of dead ends right there before it hits Northeast Sacramento Street. So the thing is that this actually does connect to Southeast Sacramento Street. It just doesn't appear to be that way on our mapping services. Right now, if I try to click on this, you can see them. Oops, sorry here. Let me pretend you didn't just see that. If I try to route through here in cycling, you can see that the route planner is diverting course because it's showing that this does not connect. But if I know for a fact that it connects and I just need to get through this path, draw lines allows you to completely ignore the base map information and connect by clicking with tiny little straight lines. So I'm clicking through here until I get back to this path. Now that I'm on the path, I switch to walking, and that allows me to plot along it accordingly. Now I'm back onto this main road, and I'm going to switch back to cycling, so it allows me to plot along through here. So in the instance that you know that there is a connecting path in real life, but it's just not appearing on our map for whatever reason, temporarily switching to draw lines allows you to sidestep some of that. A few little pro tips to keep in mind while you're building routes. All right, next thing I want to talk about are map types. Let me clear my map. I'm going to zoom out a bit. So we offer a variety of different map types in Ride with GPS. Sorry, I'm just going to turn off one more thing real fast. I'll explain what all of this is a little bit later. Oh, actually, sorry, before I move on, we talked about routing mode, but one thing I actually didn't talk about is underneath routing mode, there's this any surface option. And if you hit this little drop-down menu, you can see a variety of other surface type options. This is a way for you to fine-tune your routing algorithm by your desired surface type. Any surface is sort of a great default to have. This is going to prioritize the bicycling infrastructure. It's going to prioritize where people ride most often, but it will ambivalently hop between paved and unpaved based on what makes the most sense for your route. Having said that, it's still going to more heavily prioritize paved roads over unpaved. Great option to have on by default, especially if you're plotting through more urban areas. Paved is still going to look for bike infrastructure. It's still going to look for where people ride most often, but it's going to most heavily prioritize paved surfaces over any of the other options in the area. Unpaved looks for bike infrastructure, looks for where people ride most often, but opt for unpaved roads that allow cycling whenever they're available. So based on the type of route that you plan on creating, these options can come in pretty handy. I do a lot of gravel riding, I do a lot of bike packing, and I mostly have unpaved selected a lot of the time because that's my preference. But feel free to play around with that. These surface type preferences will take place from the time that you select it on forward. It's not going to retroactively change your route. Okay, now let's talk about map types. So there's a whole bunch of different map types in Ride with GPS. You'll see your map type menu here in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. And RW GPS cycle is the one that's selected by default when you open up the route planner. This is my personal favorite map type. It's not just because it's our own proprietary map type. I really like the contrast of this map style. The way that the roads are called out against geography makes it very clear and easy for me to see where like the street is versus where a park is and plot accordingly. The other reason I really like it is you'll notice that there are these green lines all over the place, and that's how we call out bicycle-specific infrastructure. If you zoom in a little bit closer, you'll see some distinctions there. Like, for example, this line of green is a little bit darker than this. If you don't know what the markings on the map mean, and I wouldn't expect you to as you're getting started, there's this little map legend icon, and if you click that, you can see what the breakdown of all of the markings on the Ride with GPS map style or the Ride with GPS cycle map style actually mean, so you get more confidence and context in the areas that you're planning. But there's a bunch of different map types, each of which call out slightly different bits of information. So let me show you a few that I think are particularly helpful. There's Google Map, which I'll bet everybody's seen before. Google Map, not my favorite map type aesthetically. I like sort of a more like a darker map type that contrasts a little bit better. But the reason I use this map type, and keep in mind I do a lot of bike packing, multi-day touring, is because of the place labels that get called out on the map. The closer you zoom in, the more you'll see. And this is basically just calling out local services in the area. Things like grocery stores, you'll see restaurants, you'll see parks, you'll see viewpoints, you'll see restrooms, stuff like that. All of this is called out on this map, which again gives you lots more context in the area, but is a great way to spot resupply in the areas that you're plotting through. While these place labels don't appear in other map types, you can use tools like points of interest, which I'll talk about a little bit later, to permanently call them out on the map. So if you're using something other than Google Maps, you'll still be able to see them. Then we have Google Satellite, which shows you the world as it actually exists. This is a really useful map type to have, but I will say that the satellite imagery makes it very hard to distinguish where the streets are. So plotting in this map type is pretty tough. But one of the ways that it really helps me is a lot of these images are pretty high fidelity. So if you zoom in close, you can get a better sense of things like road quality in a particular area. Yeah, the closer you zoom in, the more detail you'll end up seeing, which is pretty cool. If you like the satellite imagery, but you want to actually create your route using this, the Google Hybrid map type might be a little bit better. This contrasts streets much better, so you can actually plot along and use this map type for route creation. One little feature I'll mention now is we have available street view. If you drag the Pegman icon onto the map, anywhere with available street view highlights in blue, and if you let go, you get a nice up close view of that specific spot, and you can interact with it. I can move a little bit further on down the road if I need to. And if I need to return to my main map, I just hit the back button down here, and I'm right back there. The next map type I will mention is OSM cycle. I like this map type a lot because it does a very good job of calling out sort of more like nationally recognized cycling networks. In blue, what we're seeing here are cycling infrastructure. These are roads that have like a bike lane or protected bike lane, that sort of thing. And in purple, and depending on where you are in the world or the country, you'll see these in red or yellow. That is calling out like nationally recognized cycling networks. This purple line we're seeing that says WV, if you haven't figured it out already, I'm based in Portland, Oregon. That's where the company is based, but we have people all over the place. This route starts just outside of Portland and takes you all the way south to Eugene, Oregon, using farm service roads. So it's hardly trafficked at all. There's beautiful views, and there's just not a lot of automobiles through the area. Having this map type turned on allows me to see this a lot better. And if I want to, I can plot along it accordingly. If you're out east, things like the Empire State Trail, Rails Trails, the Erie Canal Trail, those routes will be called on this map type by default. So if you want to plot along them, you can do that nice and easy. If you're in Europe, things like Eurovelo routes are called out on this map type by default, and you can plot along those accordingly. So this is a pretty useful map type for a variety of different reasons. And then the last one I'll mention here is Esri Topo. This might be a close second in my favorite map types. The reason I like it is because it calls out hill shading, so you get more of a 3D map view. And the closer you zoom in, excuse me, you'll actually start to see topography. And that also helps see a more 3D map view in the areas that you're looking at. The topography allows me to see where the climbing is, where peaks and valleys are versus where the climbing isn't, and I can create my route based on what my actual preferences are here. Everybody has their own favorite map type. Feel free to play around, switch back and forth based on what your own preferences are. You'll figure out which one you like, but again, you can always hop back and forth based on what you feel. Okay, next thing I want to do is talk about our settings menu. And let me actually create a route so we can see this in action a little bit better. Okay, I'll take that to Rocky View. Okay, so settings menu. This is the information that you can sort of like fine tune on top of your route line or on your map while you're creating a route. Surfaces, I'd recommend having that turned on. That shows you the surface type breakdown that I ran you through a little bit earlier. Queue icons. With queue icons turned on, you can see these little dialog boxes on the route line showing you each space that you actually have a queue on the route. If you click on any of these, you'll be able to see what information is included in there, which is nice and handy. I will say when I'm like building or editing my route, I like to see the route line with as little stuff on top of it as I can. So I turn this on and off as needed. Custom POI, we haven't talked about points of interest yet, but we will very soon. So I would recommend leaving this one on. Distance markers. When you have this turned on, you'll see periodic distance markers that show you how far in a particular. The closer you zoom in, the more you'll end up seeing. In addition to showing you the distance, it also helps with directionality. Oops. And then we have directional arrows, which I always leave turned on. That shows the little directional chevrons along the route line, so you can get a sense of the directionality just by quickly looking at the route. For a point-to-point route, it's easy enough to tell which direction you need to go. But for something like a loop route, it's a little bit tougher, which makes this sort of a useful little feature. And then the stuff in the middle is pretty self-explanatory, so I'll leave that for now. But the hold spacebar to toggle menu is pretty cool. There's a whole bunch of different options, but right now I have route lines selected. So let's zoom in a little bit. I have this existing route, and I'm actually curious to see if it's using bicycle infrastructure, which again, we indicate on this map by the green lines all over the place. Problem is that my route line is running through here, so I can't actually see what's going on underneath the route line. Because I have in my settings, route line selected under the hold spacebar to toggle menu, if I hold my spacebar down, the route line temporarily disappears, so I can see what's going on underneath it, right? And I can see there is some green, so we are using bike infrastructure, which is great. Once I let go of my spacebar, the route line reappears, so I can see it nice and easily again. So again, I didn't actually get rid of my route line, I just temporarily hid it so I could see what was going on underneath it. Great way to sort of quickly hide that information and bring it back. All right, so I'm right about at the point where I'm going to transition into talking about more of the advanced, like premium route planning and editing tools and tasks that we can do. Everything that I've covered up until this point is available with a either a starter, a free, or a basic subscription. Everything from this point on will sort of mostly be premium features that I discuss. So the first premium feature that I wanted to show is our heat map overlay. And this is one of my personal favorite features for route planning because for me, creating routes from scratch, at least when I started, was nerve-wracking because how do I know if it's any good, right? Like, I might have a good sense of the areas that I'm planning, but how do I really know if where I'm planning is stuff that I would actually want to ride a bike on? The heat map is my favorite context tool in this regard because what the heat map is a visual representation of where people ride their bikes most frequently. This data, and I'll turn this on in just a sec, but this heat map data is coming directly from people who publicly record rides within Ride with GPS, whether that's done with our app or a GPS device, like a head unit that's connected to our app. If they record activities publicly from those devices, we'll feed that into our heat map so you can visually see where people ride most often. So let me turn this on. Hit the heat map drop-down menu. There's a whole bunch of different types of heat maps you can choose from, but we're going to turn on the cycling heat map, which is our global heat map. This is the one most people are going to use, I think. So I've turned that on, and now my map is super busy with a bunch of purple lines running all over the place. The idea here is the deeper and darker the color of purple, the more frequent bicycle traffic that particular road or trail gets. Now let me give you an example here. So the area I'm zooming in on is the Council Crest neighborhood in Portland. And this sort of squiggly oval we're looking at is Southwest Fairmount Boulevard, and it is one of the most heavily cycled roads in Portland. And you can tell it's got a very deep and very dark heat map signature on it. People will like run laps on this on their lunch break, and you can sort of tell, right? But if I zoom in a little bit, and I look at this road in the middle here, I see that it has a little bit of purple on it. It's a much lighter color, which tells me that it's not quite as popular as Southwest Fairmount Boulevard, but people are actually riding their bikes on it. And there's a couple of different ways you can think about heat map data. Turn it on in areas you've ridden a million times to see where cool side roads are that you've been riding past and haven't explored yet. It's really nice if you need to change the structure of your route at all. If you need to click and drag that route line, maybe you're heading to a park and you want to see the most cycled way to get there, this allows you to see it. Turn this on in areas you've never been before to quickly and easily see where people ride most often, and click to use those roads over the other options that you have. Now the heat map is really cool in urban areas, but when you have like grid streets set up, it can look a little bit busy. Where I really like to use it is in more rural areas. So where I've taken us now is Carson, Washington. And the wilderness here is really nice, and I do a lot of bike packing and like gravel riding in this area. Everything that we're seeing here is heavily forested, which you can tell by all of the screen on the map. The roads that run through here are all unpaved Forest Service roads. So yeah, all unpaved stuff, and it can get pretty remote here. Now, plotting through here used to make me really nervous because I just don't know the area well, and I don't want to end up someplace that's unsafe or where people aren't actually riding. But the heat map allows me to see where people are actually going and allow me to make more informed decisions as I plot through this area. Now, one of the coolest things about the heat map is you can actually select the duration of data you're looking at. Right now I have all time selected, which means I'm seeing the heat map data from as long as the heat map has been a thing. This is much more historical data. But if I switch to the last 30 days, now I'm just seeing the last 30 days of recorded ride history. And the heat map changes a little bit. It's still super busy, but there's nowhere near as much heat in some of these areas as there was previously. And then I can also switch to the last 7 days. And that changes up even a little bit more. It used to be that you had to create a route, drive all the way out to the trailhead, only to discover, seasonally speaking at least, that it's completely covered in snow and you can't actually ride it. The heat map data, the recency options allow me to sort of gut check myself and ensure that people are actually riding through this area, especially during the shoulder seasons when snow is receding in certain areas, increasing in others. This really allows you to get a more real-time view of if the route or the area that I plan on creating or that I plan on riding through is actually rideable right now or not. You can turn this on and off as needed. And again, heat map is one of my favorite route planning and editing tools. That is a premium feature. So let me take us outside of the route planner briefly. I'm going to head back to my main screen by hitting the Ride with GPS icon in the upper left. And one thing I wanted to briefly mention here, so if we're looking at my home screen, you'll see a whole bunch of routes, and then you'll see some activities that I have recorded, right? The activities are sort of labeled with this little cycling label. Real quick, activities are just a record of what I've done and where I went. They are not natively navigable. It's just a record of what I've actually done. The thing is that activities don't have a cue sheet associated with them, and that's what's actually providing you with those turn-by-turn navigation prompts. But let's say you went on a really nice ride and you want to actually turn it into a route that you can navigate. You're not out of luck. We have a tool that'll allow you to do that. It's known as the trace tool, or the auto trace tool rather. So I'll use this taking Charles home route, so picking up my kid from daycare. Let's say I wanted to turn this into a navigable route. To do that, I hit More, Open Copy in Route Planner. All right, we're loaded up. Normally you'd see a cue sheet over here, but there's no cues because again, this is just a recording. So I'm going to click Trace and select Auto Trace. And what's happening right now is the route planner is tracing the recorded line and automatically generating a cue sheet for it as it goes, which turns it into a route. Process is already done. I click OK. And then from here, all I have to do, by the way, there's your full cue sheet associated with it. All I have to do is go down to the bottom and hit save, and then this route will be saved to my route library so I can use it later on. So let me hit save. Charles getting home, traced. I'll leave that in parentheses. I can just say route version. And from there, I just hit save. Now this is officially saved to my route library. Quick little thing is that auto-traced routes can slightly change based on the original. We're limited to the base data when we do the auto-trace. So sometimes, for example, again, if you rode the wrong way down a one-way street and you auto-trace it, we would divert the course of your route a little bit to make sure that you're still following the rules of the road. It's a little tough to see in my screen share here, but if you hover over, so you'll see I have two routes on the left-hand side. I have the trace version, which is the route version, and then the original version. If I zoom in a little bit closer, you might be able to see this better. If I hover over the other route, the original, you can see it highlight on the map in blue, so I can see where they are the same and where they're different from one another. That way, if you need to make any changes to have them more accurately line up with the original, you definitely have that option to do. So that's the auto trace feature. Let me clear my map one more time. And what I want to do now is talk about points of interest and highlights. And I'll explain the difference between the two in just a moment here. Let me create that quick little example route. Go to Rocky Butte. Okay, so points of interest. Points of interest are little visual markers that you can add to either the route map or the route line itself to call out something important along the way. Now, the way that POI behave is slightly different based on whether you add them to the map or to the route line. So I'm going to walk you through sort of both of these methods here. So first use case. While this is a pretty urban route and I don't really need to worry too much about access to water, let's pretend that this is a much longer route and I want to call out some potential water resupply along the way. Now, the use case here is I don't actually plan on stopping at every single one of these water resupplies, but I want to see them on the map so I can at least plan ahead of time and know where my next water stop can actually be so I can limit or just plan how much water I'm actually taking in based on where resupply is. If I zoom in closely here, we'll see Mount Tabor has a big old body of water, and maybe I want to call that out on the map. To do that, I hit Custom POI. I click on the map where I want it added. That pulls up the point of interest save form, which will default to this informational icon. But if you hit the drop-down menu, there are a bunch of different points of interest icons that you can choose from. So I will choose a water icon. You can see that reflected on the map. We'll require that you give it a name, say water source. You can add a description, link to a website. I've seen people do that if they're adding a POI to call out a restaurant and they want to include the menu. You can also add photos. From here, I hit save. And now that point of interest icon officially appears on the map. Now, the thing is this is just a visual marker on the map to call out whatever it is I've added here. Because my route line doesn't actually go to that point of interest, it doesn't appear in the cue sheet, and simply adding a point of interest to the map does not divert the course of your route to take you to that point of interest. But there is one handy little feature here is if you click on an existing point of interest that you've added to the map, you'll see two options. Include in route, which I'll select here. That diverts the course of your route to take you to that point of interest, and then you continue onward to your previously selected destination. Let me hit the back button. The other option is route to here. Now, what that's going to do is connect the last plotted point of your route to this point of interest. And that's typically something you do if like this point of interest was ahead of the last plotted point, because right now if I click this, it's going to take me all the way back from the last plotted point at Rocky View to this point of interest, which isn't what I want to do here. But you have both of those options. Now let me show you what happens when you add a point of interest to the actual route line, because the behavior is a little bit different. Let's say that every time I ride my bike through here, there is, actually no, let's say there's a really beautiful viewpoint right here and I want to call that out. So I have point of interest turned on, custom POI buttons turned on. I click on the map where I want to add it. And okay, information icon pops up. Let me go to the viewpoint and I will say nice view. And once I hit save, that icon appears on my map. But we have some other stuff that comes with it. In addition to it appearing on the actual route line, it also appears in my elevation profile. Right now, I'm not seeing the point of interest icon that I chose reflected yet, but I will once this route is actually saved. In addition to seeing it in the elevation profile, it also appears in the cue sheet, which means that during navigation, I will be alerted of this point of interest like any other cue, meaning I will see a visual marker over the top of the screen. I will also hear our app saying, nice view, calling out that point of interest right there. And I'll see it on the route line as I ride along, which is a really great way to make sure you don't miss something important along the way. A little side note here is when you add a point of interest to the route line, it becomes what we call a waypoint. And a waypoint will sync over to your external GPS device. So normally speaking, if you add just a point of interest to the map itself, not to the route line, that won't sync over to your external GPS device. Side note here, there are some extenuating circumstances that it could. It really depends on which device you're using and how recent it is. But if you add a point of interest to the actual route line, that will sync over to an external GPS device like a Garmin or a Wahoo and be displayed just like any other queue announcement would be. So yeah, point of interest added to the route line become waypoints. Waypoints appear in the cue sheet and will sync over to external GPS devices. If you just add a point of interest to the map, it's not called out in the cue sheet. It's just a visual marker in our app so you can see something is coming up that you might want to actually pay attention to. By the way, while you navigate this in our app, if you tap a point of interest icon, you'll be able to see any description information that was added to it, which is nice to know. Okay, next I want to talk about custom cues. And just for fun, so we can see this visually better, I'm going to turn on my cue icons. Custom cues are pretty much what they sound like. It's a custom entry into your cue sheet to call out something important along the way. So I'll click the custom cue button on the right-hand side. Now let's say every time I ride my bike past this specific spot, I'm chased by a pack of angry dogs, and I just want to call this out for the other people that are going to be riding through here. I click on the route line where I want to add it. It always defaults to this generic icon, but there's a bunch of pre-selected cues you can choose from based on whatever it is you want to call out. I'll choose danger. And anything you put in the notes field, this is what's actually going to be read out loud and visually displayed during navigation by our app. So I will say, watch out for angry dogs. So that will actually be read out. You'll hear the app say, danger, watch out for angry dogs while I navigate this route. You can include a lot of information in this notes field. You can include a description too. Great way to sort of customize what information is called out along your route line while you're going. So I hit save. Now that icon is officially saved, that cue is officially saved to my route. If I click the icon, I can see what exactly it says. And this is also included in my cue sheet. So again, it'll be announced during navigation. And also custom cues will sync to external GPS devices like Wahoo and that sort of thing. All right. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about here is changing a start, because that is one of the most frequent editing tasks in the route planner, and people are always usually a little bit confused about how the process works. The process is a little bit different for point-to-point routes as opposed to loop routes, so I'm going to run you through this and show you exactly how it goes. So for a point-to-point route, let's say this route is perfect. I don't want it to change at all, except I want it to start over here in Mount Scott. This is actually pretty easy to do. All you have to do is click the start and drag it over to Mount Scott. But as you'll see here, oh no, my whole route's changing. I don't want that. Let me hit the back button. In order to prevent the rest of my route from changing, when I click and drag that start point over, I need to use a control point, right? You'll remember control points from earlier. They help constrain the structure of your route. Click control point here. I'm going to add my control point just after my start to lock in everything after that first control point. Now, when I click my start, move it over to Mount Scott. You can see the only thing that changes is just what's before that first control point. The process for changing the endpoint is exactly the same. Add a control point just before the endpoint, drag the endpoint into place. Perfect. Process is a little bit different for a loop route, so let's bring one of those in here. I'm gonna clear my map. So for premium subscribers, you have access to this handy little import tool, which is basically a direct line into your route library, so you can pull in existing work without actually leaving the route planner. It's searchable by keyword. Cool. Pull this one in. You can select multiple routes at a time if you want, and add to planner. All right, so I have this loop route, starts and ends over here in Lyle. Excuse me. But let's say I actually wanted to start and end right over here on my route line. All you have to do is move your cursor over to where you want it to start and end now. Right click. From the right click menu, go to where it says make route start here. And I will just sort of quickly call out that almost our entire editing menu exists in this right click option. And I tend to use this right click menu all the time. So don't forget that it's there. I'll show you a couple of other examples of how I use it in just a little bit, but this is an awesome feature. So I'll do make route start here. That leaves the structure of my route exactly the same as it originally did, except it moves my cursor or moves my start and end point over to where I right clicked on the route. From here, I sort of conveniently have a control point just after my start and a control point just before my end point. Let's say I want this route to start and end in Centerville. Click my start, add it over to Centerville. Great, but you can see that my endpoint is now just shy of Centerville. So I can click the endpoint, drag it over to Centerville, and change it up accordingly. So now this route starts and ends in the exact same place. I go into the loop, complete it, and then head all the way back to where I started. Awesome. Let me hit the back button a little bit here. Take me back a little. Okay, so the next tool I want to show you is my favorite route editing tool. It's called the delete selection tool. Prior, when I was showing you control points and clicking and dragging the route line along, when you click the route line and you start to drag it, the route planner highlights the route line in black to give you a preview of what the edit's going to look like. That's sort of the route planner saying, hey, if you don't want to use those original roads, we think these are the next best roads for you to use. And while that's really nice and will work most of the time for you, there's going to be moments where you have a very specific idea of the alternate routing that you want, and clicking and dragging just isn't giving you exactly what you're looking for. This is where the delete selection tool comes into play. So right now, right at this point here, at this control point, I'm turning left, I'm heading along this unpaved road, and I'm crossing the river up top here and heading down the Klickitat River Trail. Let's say that instead of turning in left here, I actually want to use some of these side streets in like a zigzag pattern, and then eventually rejoin my route just past this river. So from the elevation profile, just before the point that you plan on making this edit, you're going to click and hold down, drag along. As I'm dragging along here, you can see a little highlight block forming. And I'm going to highlight just a little bit past where I plan on rejoining. Okay, there's the highlight block at the bottom of the screen. Once I let go of my click, we zoom in a little bit. We show the selected portion in blue so you can see it a little bit better. And now some of my selection tools are automatically revealed to me. Okay, one of the options here is delete selection, which I'm going to select. Once I hit delete selection, it kind of looks like I just removed the entire second half of my route, right? But what I've done is I've actually split it into two sections. On the screen in red is my active route. This is everything leading up to the portion that I deleted. If you look up top here, you'll notice a little green dot, and then you'll see this faint gray line, which is showing me the inactive section of route. This is everything after the portion of my route that I deleted. If you look on the left-hand side of my route planner, you'll see that I now have two items loaded in here. My active route, the one shown on the screen in red, the one that I'm currently working on, is highlighted on the left in blue. The inactive route, the one that is not highlighted in blue on the left-hand side, if I hover over it, you can see it highlighted in blue on the map itself, so you can see it a little bit better. And again, this is the second portion of my route after the section I deleted. Whenever you have your route split into multiple sections, or whenever you have multiple items loaded into your route planner, you're going to see this green dot at the start of the next consecutive route that's loaded in here. And this is ultimately what we're going to click to rejoin the two portions of our route back together. So what I'm going to do is zoom in close. I'm going to click along the alternate roads that I want to use. And I said I would do this in a zigzag pattern, which is really just my way of showing you like This is not necessarily alternate routing that the route planner would have chosen, but I am being very specific and telling it exactly what I want. I'm clicking along here. And once I get close enough to that green dot, if I hover over it, it gives me a preview of what this connection is going to look like. When I'm ready to rejoin, I click, and that joins the two portions of my route back together. I have the original route, which is the same as it originally existed. This is everything leading up to the portion that I deleted. Then I have my funky little zigzag section, and then I go into the remaining portion, which again is the same as the original one. So if you have a very specific idea of the alternate routing that you want, the route planner allows you to sort of do that by using the delete selection option and then clicking along the alternate roads that you want to use before joining it all back together. Now, let's say that this route, I can conceivably do this all in one day, but let's pretend this is really long and I actually want to break it up into smaller segments. Maybe I want to break it up by day. You can do that nice and easy using the split route tool. I'll show you how to use it in just a sec, but one thing to keep in mind is if you have like a really long route, a route that's like, hundreds or thousands of miles in length, the file size for that route can be equally large, which can potentially cause issues sending it to an external GPS device or even navigating it within the Route with GPS app. As a good general rule to keep in mind, I'd recommend the longest individual segment of route be at most 250 miles, 400 kilometers or less. That will sort of ensure optimal performance in our app or in an external GPS device if you send it to any of those devices. So here's the workflow for taking a big route and splitting it up into smaller segments. If you are working on a big route and you are splitting it, I would recommend that you save as you go. So here's sort of the process. Let's say I want to split this route into 20-mile segments. So a couple ways to do this. From the elevation profile, you can move your cursor to mile 20 and right-click. From the right-click menu, you can hit split route. This is how I typically do it. Or you can click the split route button on the right-hand side and then click either on the route line or in the elevation profile where you want to perform that split. So I'm at mile 20, I click, and that splits the route into two segments. You'll see them both listed on the left-hand side. So my first section, that's the active route. This is the first 20 miles. Then underneath that is everything after that first split. So I did recommend that we save as we went. So now that I have this first section split, I hit the save button. And I'll call this Big Trip Day 1. And then I'll hit save. So that first day is saved to my route library, but I still have more work to do, right? I still need to take that route and split it into subsequent segments. So I don't want to view the route right now. So I'm going to hit this X. That allows me to stay in the route planner. I'm going to click my inactive route to make it active. And by the way, you'll see that my first day is now officially titled. Click the second route to make it active. Okay, great. That's highlighted on the left in blue, now shown on the map in red. And I'm going to rinse and repeat these steps. Move my cursor to mile 20, right click, split route. Okay, that makes my next split. Now I'm going to hit save. And this will be Big Trip Day 2. When you're working on existing stuff and making edits to it, you'll always see the option to overwrite the existing. Overwrite will replace the original version with this new version, which is what we don't want. Save as new route will save this route in addition to the original one. So I hit save route. All right, I still have more work to do, so I hit the X. Now I'm going to make my last day active, and I'm going to hit save. And this will be Big Trip Day 3. All right, so now all of these individual segments that make up this full trip are saved to my route library so I can access them later on. Nice and easy to do. And then let's say I wanted to combine these. By the way, if you ever pull in a bunch of existing routes into your route planner, you can always reorder how they're listed by clicking and dragging them on the left-hand side of the screen. But if I wanted to rejoin these, I'll head to day 1, click that green dot that joins day 1 with day 2. And then if I hit that last one, that joins basically day 1, day 2, and day 3 back together. Nice and easy there. All right, so thanks for bearing with me here. I've taken up almost an hour of your time, but I want to show you one last feature that I think is pretty cool. And that is our advanced map layer menu. So let me head back to Portland here real fast. And you can access your advanced map layer menu from the layers option here at the top of the screen. So let's do highlights. Toggle this on. And now we're seeing a bunch of point of interest icons on the map. The closer you zoom in, the more you'll see. What the highlights layer is basically a base map of community added points of interest. So again, we're in Portland here, so the good people of Portland have been adding these highlights to the map to call out points of interest that they use frequently and they think other people might want to know about. You can see things like restrooms being called out, viewpoints, you can see parks, you can see bike shops. Being that it's Portland, there's a lot of coffee shops and a lot of breweries all over the place. This is great to get more context in the areas that you're planning, and these are also interactive. Maybe I wanted to include Stumptown Coffee on my map. If I click, I can click this little option up top to convert to a custom POI. So now that point of interest is added on my map, and if I turn off the highlights layer, you can still see that listed on the map. If you want to contribute your own point of interest to the highlights layer, just add a point of interest to the map. When you actually go through and save, you can check this little box here that says contribute to highlights layer, and then that'll be sent to our QA department who will make sure that it's appropriate and officially add it to the highlights layer. So again, highlights, awesome way to get more context in the areas you're planning. It's basically a lot like those place labels in Google, but actually added by community members, and a lot of stuff that we call out in the highlights layer may not appear as a place label in Google Maps. Next, we have community photos. So earlier, and I'm going to show you sort of my use case for these, I showed you Street View. And one thing I didn't mention is that Street View is not available in all areas. I believed that Google used like a fleet of Priuses to take those photos. So if a Prius can't drive down that road, chances are we don't have available Street View for it. The area that we're in right now is that area I showed you earlier in Carson, which is where I do a lot of bike packing and gravel riding. And you'll see these little blue dots all over the place. So this is an area that does not have ubiquitous Street View, but I can see community photos, which are indicated by these little blue dots. And that show me that photos that have actually been taken in the specific location where these icons appear. So if I hover over this, I can see a little preview of the camera roll here. If I click it, I can actually scroll through here and get more of an up-close view of whatever photos have been taken through here. And I'll use this one for example. If I click on it, I get a nice up-close view, and this tells me a little bit of information. Not only is it a very cool looking place to ride, but like the road quality here looks like hard pack with a little bit of gravel on top, which is exactly the type of stuff I like to ride. So I might include this in my route. This looks like a pretty cool road. So yeah, community photos, another great way to get more context in the areas that you're planning. Let me turn this one off. I'll turn on MTB trail ratings, which is cool whether you're into the mountain biking or you want to avoid it. MTB trail ratings layer will highlight mountain bike infrastructure and color code it by difficulty level. So if you zoom in closely, you can see how this is actually broken down. And you can actually reference the rating system in this little drop down here. We offer the IMBA trail difficulty rating and the single track scale based on whatever it is you are comfortable with. So again, whether you want to see the mountain bike stuff, want to use the mountain bike stuff or not, this is a helpful little layer to see where it's at. Next we have, we have the unpaved cycling layer. This shows you as a base map where any unpaved roads are that allow cycling traffic. We highlight that in this sort of beige color that we're seeing on the map. And again, kind of like MTB trail ratings, whether you want unpaved stuff or you want to avoid it, seeing it as a base map is a nice way to just have more context as you plan. And then we have the wind overlay, which is pretty cool. This shows you in real time wind speed and the direction of movement of the wind. The movement of these dots is showing you the direction, and the color of the map is showing you the speed. You can reference the speed in this little spectrum down below. It looks like we have like roughly 20 mile per hour winds heading east. And while it's cool to see this information in real time, maybe you have a route that you're planning on riding tomorrow and you want to see what the conditions look like tomorrow at like 3 o'clock. If you move this little slider bar over to 3 p.m. tomorrow, I can see what conditions will look like when I actually plan on riding it. And they look more or less the same. Maybe the wind slowed down just a tiny bit, but again, nice information to have. Air quality index. This shows you real-time air quality index, so you can see if you're going to be riding through, smoke or something like that. In the Pacific Northwest, we have a lot of seasonal forest fires, so this is a really nice feature to have to see if you're going to be riding through some smoke or not. In that same vein here, we do also show US and Canada wildfire maps, which is a very useful layer. Unfortunate to have to need it, but this shows you any active forest fires that are going on by area, so you can make informed decisions about where you're going to be riding to make sure that you're being safe along the way. And I should have also said too, air quality and below are all specific to the US layers right now, excluding the US Canada ones. Then we have snow depth. And again, this is US specific, but this will show you snow coverage in real time. If we look at Mount Adams, you can sort of see what this looks like. If we were looking here in winter, this entire area would be, purple, brown, indicating a lot of heavy snowfall. This is updated daily, so the data is almost real time, so you get really nice data to help inform your planning as you create your route. And then lastly, we have US cell coverage, which shows you cell coverage by provider as a map, so you can see if you're going to be able to access cell data, make a phone call if you need to, that sort of stuff. All right. So that's about it for our big old walkthrough of creating routes in Ride with GPS and editing them. There's a lot of information in here. We'll have it set up in chapters so you can look in the description and jump to a specific spot if you need to. But the last thing I'll just mention is if anybody has any follow-up questions or concerns about the information presented here, you're more than welcome to email me, and I'm very happy to help out with that sort of stuff. My email address is Dylan, that's D as in dog, YLAN, and that is at ridewithgps.com. Thanks a lot, everybody.